As soon as we have the agenda up on the screen, we will get started. I think that's so quiet. I think this is.
The IT part.
All right. Director.
We're ready.
President Roden, we are ready. If you'd like to,
I will, good morning. I will call the special board meeting workshop #1 retail water rates workshop to order at 9:32.
yes, thank you.
Oh. I guess I should keep going.
Whenever you're ready.
We have roll call, please.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, and I apologize for the delay this morning. Director Gardner,
I am here.
Director Torres. Here. Director Denstedt. Director Risby.
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning, President Roden.
Yes, I am here. Good
President.
morning.
Good morning, President Roden. You do have a quorum today.
Okay, we'll move on to public comments. Do we have comments today?
We have no request to speak in person. However, I did receive one public comment on Friday that has been provided to the board on the dais, and staff is looking into it. It will be made part of board meeting record.
Move on to the action agenda. 4A Western Municipal Water District Retail Rate Workshop. That's almost a tongue twister. #1, Mr. Miller.
All right, well, tongue twister, that's the easiest part of the day. So let's pull up the PowerPoint. So we're relax, enjoy yourself, grab a cup of coffee. I think we have 50 slides. So there's a lot behind this. As you know, water is fundamental to everything that we do, to all of our individual families, our community, our businesses, the economy of Southern California, the economy of California. So when we start talking rates and the charges that we need to charge our customers, it's serious business for us. And we want to make sure that it's very, very well thought out, well documented, and that we are transparent with our customers on how we got there. Obviously, we serve 1 million people in our service area. Not all of those directly, but the 100,000 that we serve directly, we want to make sure that we're good stewards of their money. And, and that's planning for their future. So we're gonna have a lot of slides talking about the background of how we got here. But I think of this as the second most important thing that we do. So we did the budget. That was step 1. That's where we figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to spend money. That's our spending plan. Well, now we got to figure out the revenue. How do we have enough money to build what the board already decided is our spending plan? So the board's leadership is invaluable, obviously, on this. This is, between, spending the money and generating the revenue. This is some of the most important things that you'll be doing. So let's start our journey here on the rates. So obviously, I already covered a bunch of this. Is we have to make sure that water is going to continue to flow for our community. And we need to make sure we have staff that can appropriately monitor flows and water quality. We can build customers. We can plan for our future. Next slide. So here's where we're going today. So we'll talk a little bit about our mission. We'll talk about the rate plan, the overview, the goals. We'll get into the cost drivers a lot. We'll talk about our cost management efforts. We'll get into what the customers will actually see, the bill impacts, And we'll talk about our plan moving forward to adoption in June. Take a little bit of break, I think halfway through. It's a long presentation, so we'll give you a chance to take a 5-minute break in the middle of it. Next slide. So we'll kick off with our mission. You know, as we look at our duty as a public entity, you know, we're looking out for the public. Sometimes I feel like, you know, we're at odds with the public on looking out for their good. And, you know, I joke with staff that, you know, we have to be the adults in the room. And sometimes the public isn't thinking long-term like we're thinking. And, you know, when you're thinking on a 30-year timeline, it's a different perspective than what's happening this year or next year or this month even. And so we want to make sure that, you know, we're really looking out for the long-term best interest of our customers' dollars. All the money we get comes from the customers, whether it's in rates they pay or property tax, it's all their money. Sometimes, in fact, we even had a slide in here that said, you know, we don't do this for profit. You know, we're strictly doing this on behalf of the customers. So service is the core of everything we do. And every dollar that we collect needs to go back towards that service for our customers. Next slide. Supplying water to Riverside County, over a million people. We're serving 25 billion gallons of water. Our infrastructure is $1.2 billion. That's probably a rough estimate. That's for our retail customers. If you look at the infrastructure for our entire service area, which would include all of our member agencies, water is an enormous investment for what we do here in our service area, and it needs to be cared for. And that's a big part of the rates, is how are we caring for our infrastructure? And that's what the public they don't recognize. They like to not think about it. They like to trust that we're taking care of it so they don't have to think about it. But it's a big part of what we do. And because it's not very visible to the customers, they have a hard time understanding the amount of money and effort it takes to invest in our infrastructure. Next
So
slide.
Craig, really quick, so the 25 billion gallons, that's just the retail?
Yeah, that's just the retail side. Okay, so you've seen this before. This is we continue to kind of modify this slide, and it's I think it's really relevant to our cost. So when you know, this is that follow the drop, you know, follow it from either Northern California or local supply through the home into the wastewater system. When we talk about our Riverside retail, it's more focused on Northern California water supply. 60% of our flow is still, for our retail customers in Riverside, is still coming from Lake Oroville, through the Delta, over the mountains, through MET's treatment process to our customers. Then we blend in the local supply at the bottom of the screen. Then it goes into our distribution system, and that's all of our pumps, pipes, tanks, meters, water quality testing, everything we have to do before it gets to your home. Then after the home, we start the sewage treatment side and the recycled water side, and very importantly, the discharge to the environment side. And, you know, some people, I go back to Sacramento, and, you know, the environmental groups will talk like we're the enemy and we're anti-environment. And the pure reality is we are the environmentalists. You know, we're the ones protecting the environment. We're the ones that are protecting those discharges to streams. And we're the ones making sure that our customers have safe, healthy water. And quite frankly, you know, if you look at environmental issues in Northern California, the money that comes from the water agencies is supporting a lot of that environmental study and a lot of those activities that are helping to recover fisheries and species. So we are very strong environmentalists. And I think that this slide has to kind of pull all of that together so that you understand the complexity of what goes into the rates analysis. Now, if you go to the Murrieta service area, we flex the local supply much stronger and a lot less on the Northern California supply. But it's still the same picture. It's just different percentages. Let's go to the next slide. So we tried to break it down a little bit. And, you know, where does your money go? Well, if you're in Riverside, because we're still getting Northern California water. About 47% of your dollar is going to water supply. About 46% is going to system operations and maintenance, routine maintenance. And about 7% is that investment going back into rebuilding our infrastructure. Next slide. Switching to Marietta, you can see the numbers change slightly. Water supply, a little less because we have more local water supply. System operations, system maintenance is a bigger chunk, and a lot of money going into infrastructure investment. You know, when we inherited or took over that system, it was a tired system down there. And so we've had to spend a lot of money into rehabbing wells, pipelines. We're gonna have some more reservoirs that we're gonna be building in the future that we're starting to plan for. So a little more into infrastructure investment in the Marietta side. All right, next slide. Let's start getting into the actual rate plan and the overview and the goals of the rate plan. Go ahead, next slide. So this is a big effort. You know, it just doesn't roll out of a computer. We don't hit the model go button and out kicks rates. It's a huge effort. And, you know, I like to think that we have a lot of outstanding expertise here at Western to do this. Our finance team and our engineering team, and some of the leaders of the organization have a lot of experience, you know, 2-3 decades of experience doing this. It's still really hard. It's very complicated. And to make sure that we're doing it right, we bring in independent expertise. So we hire consultants to do a cost of service study. Well, the preparation internally for that cost of service study is intense. You know, that consultant has to understand everything we do and where all the money goes and how we move things around operationally and investment wise. Then when the consultant's done, then it goes back to our team and we have to make sure that everything that consultant did is double checked and make sure we fully understand the assumptions and the theories that the consultant used. So we've been vetting that. You've heard me talk about, we don't know what the numbers are. And we've been talking about this for months. We don't have the final numbers. Well, this has been the vetting process of Rick, and Kevin is still involved in this. Rick's brand new, so we didn't want to saddle him with this responsibility by himself. And, you know, thank goodness Kevin has committed to staying engaged, which has been really helpful. He's been on the calls with our consultant, but it is, I don't want to just keep saying it's complicated, but it is very intricate. And there are a lot of ways that, you know, we can space money out to make sure that we have a smooth, steady rate increase and we don't have these roller coasters. And I think you're all aware of other agencies that haven't raised rates for a long time, thinking they're doing someone a favor, and then whew, off the chart. You know, Metropolitan was famous for, I think they went 5 years without a rate increase. And then in 1 year, they had a 19% rate increase and a 14% rate increase, all in 1 year. We don't ever want to do that to our customers. So very important, the review process. Oh, and also legal. Remember, our cost of service study is a legal document that's going to defend how we implement these rates. And if you go back a few years ago to the lawsuit that was filed against us saying that our budget-based rates were illegal. And we won that case hands down. And that was based on our cost of service study. It was kind of like, you know, we slid like one document to the judge and that documented everything to show that, no, we did it per 218 and it was all appropriately done. So we want to be in that same position. And the document now is a lot thicker because this is a thing now where people are going to challenge rates in the courts. All right, next slide. I don't want you to wait. I know 50 slides to wait till the final answer. So we're going to give you the final answer right now. So you can see what we're doing. You don't have to think this is going to be really scary. So let me walk you through this. So in the yellow, during the budget, when you approved the budget, when the board approved the budget, we had anticipated there would be an 8% raise, 8.1% raise in Riverside and 7.9% raise in Marietta. After we did all the work, you can see where it is. First year, we're looking at 7.5%, 7%, 7.2, and 7.3 over the next 4 years. Marietta, 6.6, 6.6, 6.6, and 6.7. So a little lower than we had anticipated during the budget. It's good news. We're down lower. The dollar impact is important. So percentages can be a little bit misleading. It's always important to look at the dollars. So you're looking at a $9 to $10 per month increase in the average customer's bill. So, you know, we have customers all over the map on how much water they take and what they use it for. So we go through a calculation for an average customer's bill. So I just wanted you to see this. So it's not kind of gnawing at you. When are you going to tell me what it's really going to be? So here it is. Now we're going to tell you how we got there. And then we'll show you these numbers again at the end.
I have a question.
Sure.
I think I know the answer, but just to clarify. So you have year one, just say Riverside, $8.96. So then year two is $9.04. That's on top of the
Yes.
previous year.
Yes, these are all cumulative.
Sure.
Now, you've also heard about pass-throughs. So this is building on the pass-through that was just implemented in January. This doesn't assume pass-throughs will be needed, but just like in the last, remember we did this 4 years ago, and the finance team has a little bit of heartburn because we don't really know what Metropolitan's going to do or what Edison's going to do 4 years out. We only know, Met's only told us what they're going to do for 2 years of these 4. So we'll ask in the final action, we'll ask for authority to do a pass-through again if we have to. But that's not included in these numbers.
Not even year one and two.
We don't need one in year 1 and 2 because we know what Metropolitan is going to do. If Metropolitan
So
came
it's
back,
figured in already.
it's figured in the first 2 years.
Okay, that's.
We hope that we're good for year 3 and 4. We've looked at Met's long-term rate projections, but they didn't match their long-term rate projections in what they adopted in the last 2 years. So
Can you remind us what Mets were?
Met was treated water, it was 10 and 11,
11% this year.
11% this year and 10 next year.
And you will get to see that on the slide coming up, so you'll have more of that data for yourself and for our customers to see.
And Director Torres, we'll kind of show you our strategy of how we're trying to predict, given past performance at Metropolitan, what we used for years 3 and 4.
So this dollar amount per is an average, is it an average household?
Yeah.
Is that how you came up with?
Yes.
So what is an average house? What are you looking at?
What is, you know what? Let us get to that, Director Risby.
Okay.
We actually have a slide after the whole presentation because we thought that question would come up.
Okay, perfect.
Maybe we should have put it right after this slide or right before this slide,
Okay.
but we have that and we'll get to it at the end.
No.
Some of those questions, make sure we don't forget to go back to the.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. So now it's going to be the Rick show. We're going to talk about the cost drivers, and there's a lot of detail here. So we're trying not to bury you in detail, but this is a workshop. And I think, you know, when the board gets questions, I think you get fairly simple questions, like, why do you need such a big rate increase? Oh my gosh, it's such a hard answer. We want to give you the information. You can decide how you want to answer those questions. But it is very complicated. So I'll step back now and we'll let Rick take over on the cost driver side of things. But feel free, this is a workshop. Happy to answer your questions as we go. Don't save them for the end, because you know, they're pertinent at the time. We may have answers coming up in the future slides, but ask your questions anyway.
Thanks, Greg. So as we were just talking about, you saw what the proposed rate changes are going to be. And the big question is, well, why? And so that's what we're going to be getting into. And so kind of getting at that big question a customer might ask, well, why the rate increases? Just to put it up front, there's really kind of three main things that drive the story. And we'll get into details on each of them. One is the simple one that everybody has seen, which is prices for everything have gone up. And so, although that's moderated a bit, we're actually playing catch up for the last few years when those were exceptionally high. The second is, of all of those cost increases that have gone up, one in particular influences most everything. It has an outsized impact, which is metropolitan costs. You know, that's either half or more than half of the water supply and certainly the costs. And the last one is, normally we have savings from this area, or at least it helps us to reduce the rate impacts, which is our local supply. But that's an area we actually have some challenges that will have a large impact on the rates this year. So you have the price of everything has gone up, especially Met's prices have gone up. And then we have some challenges that constrain our local supply or add costs to it. And we'll get into each of those. Next slide, please. So getting into this on that first point, that the costs of everything have gone up. And this is doing a sort of 5-year average look back, because some years were exceptionally high and it's moderated a bit. But on the first point, so our customers have seen this, you've all seen this. You know, the price of everything, I think eggs makes the big headline news, $9 a carton. But I mean, from energy increases, which we also face even more so, but cost of services, everything. And so each thing that our customer sees, we also see. If you look at the price of chemicals, if you know, we have supplies, we have inventory, all of these things we've seen price increases for. So those get built into the rates because we have to keep pace with that. But there are certain costs which have an outsized impact on our budget, which are increasing well in elevation to just normal cost increases. And so probably the primary one is energy. We see on average, we have seen and continue to expect to see roughly 10% per year rate increases from our energy providers. And so a lot of that is dealing with cost pressures that they have, but that doesn't seem to be dissipating at all. And who knows what kind of impact the recent fires will have as they try and recover costs in that regard. And then the other one is, if you've done any home projects lately, you've seen this come to place, but the cost of construction of projects, obviously, a large part of our budget goes to investing in our infrastructure. And so those have seen well above the 5% usually, and actually, if we just look at construction averages, 8% per year increases. So it starts to give you a sense of when we're talking about 6 and 7% rate increases, how this falls right in line with what we're seeing that we need to pay everyone else. Next slide, please. So that second topic I mentioned, and we'll get into a little bit more detail on this, is that primary bill that we pay is the imported water bill, which is the rates that we have to pay to Metropolitan. And so not only are they facing inflation, because we're all in the same boat here, but there are some special challenges which are causing well above normal rates of inflation on that rates. And so what this really comes down to, and again, we'll get into a little bit more detail, is the sort of business model structure problem that Met has, which is they rely very, very heavily for how much water they sell to make sure they have enough revenue to pay for their bills. But most of their bills do not change based on how much water they sell. So their fixed costs are well over 80%, which, those are the costs that don't change, but they're only getting 25% of their revenues that are stable. Which wouldn't be a problem if they sold the same amount of water every year. But that has been far from the truth. And in fact, from their most recent peak year in 2003, sort of when their most recent rate structure was built, to right now, they've dropped half in water sales. And it doesn't take much of a drop in water sales to have a really outsized impact on their finances, deplete their reserves and everything else. So this is their challenge. And their only way, at least that they've shown, to make up for that is they just increase rates. By whatever the water sales are going down, they have to make up that revenue just with the rate increase, which is what we've seen recently. Next slide, please.
We leave that one, right?
Sure, let's go on.
I think, if I'm looking at it correctly,
Let's go back to the prior slide, please.
the MWD revenue pie chart is backwards. Variable is the light blue.
Oh, yeah, I got it.
Oh, the color, yeah,
Yes,
the colors
yeah.
are backwards. Yes.
Yeah, they have 25% fixed revenues and 75% variable revenues. Yes.
And they did adjust that up a bit with their tax structure.
Yeah, they increased the ad valorem a little
Right.
bit, right?
And this reflects that change.
Yes.
That this is the
It
higher,
was worse before.
yes, yeah. Yeah, very good point.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're good. Sorry. We're good with numbers, apparently colors.
Some numbers are valuable.
Next slide. So this one, staff were talking about, because we always are challenged with how do you communicate this with customers? Like what makes sense to everybody? Because, you know, infrastructure and metropolitan costs aren't typical dinner talk. And so, along that lines, I think we're all familiar with something like Netflix. And so the thought was, you know, Netflix has to pour out a tremendous amount of money to create content. They hope they have subscribers to pay for it. But they're paying for servers, content, and movies, and all these sorts of things. Those are their fixed costs. Similarly, you know, we have to pay for infrastructure. Met has to pay for infrastructure, regardless of how much water flows through it. And so this is just one of those connections that, although infrastructure may seem like a sort of new and interesting idea for our customers to get their minds around, they do see this sort of same struggle with businesses across the board that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, please. So this is getting to that challenge that I was just talking about with Metropolitan and them relying so heavily on variable sales, or the amount of water that they're selling, and how that translates to actual rates. And so Director Torres, this is kind of getting to your question on, well, what rate increases do we have in these projections that our rates are based on? And so you have two numbers on these graphs, and I'll explain each. The dark blue is the treated water rate. And so we often hear metropolitan headline rates. And so we've heard 8.5%, that's the lighter blue or the turquoise blue. We heard 8.5% in the press releases and the Met Board workshops, but that's their average rate of all other types of water sales and transactions and these kinds of things. The dark blue is what we pay the most in, which is treated water. So that's the most relevant to us to give you a sense of its impact. And so, although they said 8.5% increases, what we're really paying in these 2 years is over 11% and over 9%. And so those have a really large impact. In the following 3 years, we only have projections, not adopted rates. So we have Met giving their best guess. And so although you see the line decreasing, those are still cumulative increases. You have an 8.4% and another 4.7 on top of that, and another 3% on top of that. And so the point being is the rates just keep going up and up. What's also important is these rates don't include any major water supply project in that Met has been discussing. So if they do either Pure Water or Delta Conveyance, those will be on top of what we have here. And that might be where we need to utilize the pass-through.
Okay, I don't know if I'm reading this wrong. You're saying the rates are going up, but you have them going down. And you're projected.
Well, no, those are the increases. So they're always going up. So it's a, you know, 11% increase, 9% increase. The increases we're showing are less, but they're still increases.
Sure.
But what Rick's talking about right now is you wouldn't see the 4.7% in 28 or the 3.1% in 29 up at Metropolitan, because they're already baking in some of these big projects like Pure Water. So we tried to back that out because there's no board action to approve Pure Water nor Delta Conveyance. So, you know, we're pushing hard at Metropolitan that you can't start charging customers for a project that doesn't have board approval. So we've tried to back that out. And then we're warning you that if they get back in there, you're gonna see higher rate increases.
So 27 doesn't have those projects either.
Mhm.
So then how come from 27 to 28, from 8.4 to 4.7?
I think because they their projection on capital projects and sales of water get fuzzier. And so if they're overly optimistic on sales projections, that really changes their rates. So like right now, we're selling, this is way in the weeds, but you know, Met wanted to put in their budget a sales projection of 1.5 million acre feet for this last budget and rates. Then, so that kept the rates below 8.5%. And then there was a lot of argument out of the Met member agency managers like myself that 1.5 is not going to happen. We're selling less water than that. That's an artificial rate just to keep rate. That's an artificial projection just to keep rates lower.
Sure.
And the only way we're going to pay our bills is to take more money out of reserves at Metropolitan. And reserves are getting really low. So Metropolitan staff brought that projection down to 1.4 million acre feet of sales. That raised rates. And then the member agencies actually went back at Met again and said, that is still too high. We're going to eat through reserves. We can't afford to lose those valuable reserves. They'll go below minimum levels. We should have a 1.3 sales projection. And so they ended up at 1.34, and that raised rates again to 8.5%. Now, Met did some other things. They said, well, we're going to sell $120 million worth of water to someone. So that'll subsidize those 2-year rates. Well, how do you unwind all of that with sales projections and capital projects? And are we going to sell water in the future? It's really hard for us to figure out that projected box.
So the projections are our projections.
Those are ours.
Ours based on what Met has said.
So they give us a 10-year vision. And I'll just say, we're not real confident that they're going to hit it. They haven't been very accurate 10 years out. So we're trying to be more realistic for our own customers.
Okay, if that's the case, and, you know, we're trying to be more realistic based on what they gave us and what we've seen. Why are we seeing in 27 through 29 a higher rate increase than what we're projecting they're gonna give us?
So the simple answer is, if we just put everything through as you're seeing it here, like the impacts from Met, our first years would be well over double digit. And so to minimize the impact on our customers, we're actually applying a lot of other resources to bring down the first years, but that means that you smooth it. You're smoothing it out. That's what we're getting to.
We have heard from our customers in the past and through the discussion, they really prefer that slow, stable, dependable rather than the wild fluctuations of the financing. We worked really hard to show you that in this proposal.
Good question.
So
That gets it, Director, that gets into why we can't just model this.
Right.
We have to use a lot of our logic and what our long-term goals are to try and smooth it out.
And so the last thing, which is just the reminder and disclosure. So if Met does officially approve any of the big projects in this time period and starts to pay for them, that will almost certainly, especially because they'll hit the last 3 years, mean much higher rate increases than what you see here. And so we'll probably have to use a pass-through to make up for that.
One last question,
Sure.
that the numbers 2014, 890 to 2029, 1789, is it based up on the rates right here?
Yes, this is just to say, 15 years ago, we were paying less than $900 an acre foot for our primary rate to Metropolitan. And it's doubled by the end of this period, just to show that you start doing these cumulatively, that's the level of rate increase, doubling in rates over a relatively short amount of time.
You know, this is just me and kind of a joke, but I'm a scientist, so if you don't put units on things, they're just numbers. I knew what it meant, but $890 of what? It would be good to good to see.
We probably asked for that to be taken off because it was too cluttered.
Probably. No, the graphic designer.
One of our last meetings was trimming out acre feet all over everything, so. Sorry, team. Daisy's gonna give us a big explanation so later.
Yes,
I told you we should have
all
that.
your feedback, and we make sure it gets reflected in future workshops and future sessions with our customers.
The professor and me would have failed you.
But it looks like.
Well, and we're also listening very carefully to the comments because remember, we're gonna start public meetings, so this will be recrafted for those community meetings. I mean, this is a public meeting, so the public can see what we're talking about today. But we're taking notes because we want to make sure that it makes sense when we go out to the community and talk about this too.
Next slide, please. So this slide was to look at this through a different lens. And so we've been talking about cost pressures. But this one is to reframe really the value of what's being provided here. And in a way that we don't normally talk about what we're providing, what customers are paying for on their water bill. Because the typical sort of question we get, especially during times of conservation, is I'm buying less water, why does it get more expensive? And so the heart of this is really the idea, and we'll reiterate this in different ways in the rest of the presentation, but our customers aren't really paying for water. They're paying for the service it takes to get them clean water exactly when they need it. And that's a system, right? And predominantly it's a delivery system, especially for us that deal in imported water. It's not just coming directly from under our feet. And so in that sense, when you think of things through the delivery lens, water is extremely heavy. And so, this is to drive home a point that I'm sure our customers don't really think about, but it's good for us to bring up. You talk, just 1 gallon of water being 8 pounds. So you talk about 1 billing unit, so a couple of dollars on their bill is 6,000 pounds worth of water. And so a typical customer is having delivered to their home roughly 140,000 pounds of water every single month. And so just to show the value of that, if we hired UPS Freight to go to Oroville and pick up their water for them and deliver it here in Riverside, it's roughly $150,000 a month to move that much water outside of our system using typical freight sort of way. And of course, their bill is well under that $100 or so, and we'll get into that detail. But this was to draw in when you think of it in terms of what customers pay for, we use delivery and all sorts of things. We're in an Amazon world. But that's what we're doing. We're taking water from over 500 miles away to get it to them. And this doesn't even touch on the treatment or the storage piece to hold on to it for exactly when they need it. And so it works out, for a typical customer, under a penny a gallon is what they're paying for. Next slide, please. And so, yes, this just reiterates, we talk about the system. Beyond the infrastructure itself, there's a tremendous amount it takes, namely highly trained professional staff, tremendous amounts of energy and resources, everything that keeps that system going.
We tattoo this on everybody. Phenomenal.
It's already
The customers or staff? Because if we're gonna do it on staff, we have to meet and confirm with the employees on that.
In the front.
Maybe we should lead with that.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. So when we're talking about these costs and these efforts, if we're doing our jobs right, you'll see that we have to be proactive. And so the last thing we want to do is be purely reactive, where we're just responding to breaks and being behind the curve. But this agency does far from that. We have to think forward and we have to invest in our systems for future benefit. And when we do invest proactively, it saves our customers a tremendous amount of money. Think of proactively replacing a pipeline versus waiting for it to break, and all the sort of damage and chaos that causes for a neighborhood. In addition to, when we're looking on the treatment facility side, Of course, we have to stay up with regulatory standards, but while we're doing that, you look at efficiency standards, how much chemical are we injecting, how much energy are we using, what's our pumping strategy? And then reservoirs, staying ahead of the curve, so that we don't have to replace them. We stay ahead of that with rehabilitations and coatings, all of this to save future amounts. And so they are expensive, but they're much less expensive than being reactive and just waiting for things to break. Next slide, please. So when I was providing the summary of cost drivers, the last one is dealing with an area that we normally see lots of value in helping to reduce rates, which is local supply. But in this area, we're seeing some challenges over this 4-year period. And that predominantly relates to state regulations and their impact on things, as well as there's details that go into all of this, but ensuring that water is clean and safe to drink. And so each of our main water service areas has a slightly different story with this, but in Riverside, we've been blessed, so to speak, with not only having access to our contract water, but contracts for surplus water through Riverside. And what we're seeing, and we'll show this in the next few slides, is because of PFAS and other concerns, we and they have to very tightly manage this. And what that means is more limited supplies of the surplus water, and I'll show that in the next slide. But that water provides tremendous value. So when we have less of it, there's a lot of cost pressures to the overall rates. And then in Murrieta, you sort of get the reverse action, which is because of our investments, we're getting back to more local supply. But those investments mean there's more infrastructure, namely treatment of that groundwater, and that adds costs for every unit of water that we're pulling from the ground. We have to do more to get that. So there's cost pressures, even though we're getting more local water in that story. Next slide. So lots of colors here, and I'll get to the main ones you should focus on. And so on the left side of the screen, you see where we have been recently, and on the right side where we're projected to go. At the bottom are our most stable local supplies. That's Meeks and Daily Water, or water releasing from Elsinore. The part you should focus on is the yellow. So that's the Riverside surplus water. And you see on the far left, that historically, when we first did the deals, what have you, that enjoyed a much larger share of the total pie, so to speak, with the surplus water, and how small that yellow portion gets by the time you get into the projected. And that's that PFAS impact in managing the system to make sure that we're staying under certain thresholds in total. And so the big point is whatever we don't take in local supply, we have to make up for that in imported, which is much more costly, and I'll get into that. But the bottom line point is, in our projected period, which are the rates we're talking about, you've got roughly a quarter less local supply than what we were enjoying before into the mix, which means a quarter more of that same supply in imported water to make up for it.
Is it just my eyes? Like sometimes the graphs aren't as accurate. So is the western portion, is that varying too?
No,
The
the western owned portion is a combination of 226 acre feet that Western owns in the San Bernardino Basin. We purchased a portion of Meeks and Daily Water Company. The other piece is the lease water from Elsinore Valley Municipal Water District. That's about 4,500 acre feet. It's a take or pay contract, so it's staying exactly the same.
Okay.
We're able to move that water.
But it did increase a little from 21 to 22.
That's what I'm seeing.
But then
24 to 26 looks like it went down just a, but it could just be that.
It should be exactly the same.
Okay, and then, I guess this is more for the future. What we're doing on Magnolia, would that help with this yellow?
we hope it does help a little bit with that.
We're doing.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I struggled with is one of the reasons that bar has gotten smaller is because of some challenges that RPU has on the production side with their well field. And so I would like to increase that for the budget because they are going to get money. They're going to be investing in new wells. But is that going to be in our 4-year horizon that we're talking about? I'm a little uncomfortable guessing about that. They're not our projects. It's out of our control. So we'll certainly hope that we can grow that yellow bar again. as they make improvements in their system.
What about the blue, what I was talking about, our project on Magnolia, right? We'll have a well on Magnolia, is that?
It's an on Magnolia is an additional intertie.
You're talking about well 7. There's 2 projects. There's a Magnolia intertie and well 7.
Okay.
So well 7 will move more water to the non-potable system. So that'll cut back on Colorado River purchases a little bit.
That-
So that'll help.
Increase our blue, our dark blue. No,
This is potable water.
This is all potable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll see that impact on the non-potable section.
Okay.
The question, couple, I think. Is the PFAS concentration in the Meeks and Daly water, or the western owned water from the San Bernardino Basin different than the RPU water?
No, it's all the same.
It's all the same. The,
Riverside does all the extraction.
yeah, the issue comes during summer when they have to bump up their production because demands are a lot
Right.
higher. That forces them into turning on more wells that don't have as good of water quality. So if they can avoid turning those wells on, that's better water quality in their system. And that's what we're seeing here,
Okay,
is that they're choosing not to use certain wells at their peak pumping times.
and we could treat for PFAS to remove it, but that's not cost effective. Alternate water supplies are currently less expensive.
Well, I think, no, I wouldn't draw that conclusion. We've certainly worked with RPU to talk about how they could treat for PFAS, and maybe we would play a part in that. So I think there's discussions going on. They're certainly in the same settlement process that we are on
Right.
PFAS. So that's why I'm hoping that that yellow bar ends up growing. Because if they can treat it at the supply side, the production side in their system, we would benefit just like the RPU customers would benefit. We could treat it at the connection. The problem is that all that water goes to all their customers first before it gets to our connection. So they don't want to put PFAS in their system. So treatment on our interconnection side wouldn't be necessary.
You're probably familiar with this, but 100% of Riverside's water comes through the Linden Evans Reservoir.
Yes.
So we get it after that. So. The other thing is that we have provided direction to our operations staff, and our operations staff works well with the city of Riverside's operations staff. We work really hard to stay below the notification levels. That's the goal, is stay below the PFAS notification levels in Riverside.
Yeah.
We don't want Western's delivery of water also to be the cause of the entire city of Riverside exceeding the notification level. So we will stay below that to the best of our ability.
Okay. I guess the clarity I'm looking for is the slide before says state requiring for quality and conservation drives costs. We could treat to meet the quality. Or the water could be treated. It's not an availability of water. It's a delivery of quality of water that water delivered.
Theoretically, yes. Whether it would be smart financially to do that.
Yeah, it's probably not cost effective.
Yeah. It's, I think.
Can we just buy Riverside? Is that just-
Let us think about how much that would cost.
Next slide, please. So this slide highlights what we've been talking so far in the sense of, the top line is metropolitan costs. And so you see the difference between that and the bottom 2 lines, the yellow being the same as the yellow before, which is the Riverside surplus. And then the bottommost blue line being that Meeks and Daly or Elson released water, so the average rates for those. Ultimately getting to the point that our local supplies are roughly half the cost of metropolitan water, even though we're paying for extraction and wheeling and all these other sorts of costs that go into that. But you also see on the top blue line, and this is the highlight, I think, Director Torres, which is what you were getting at when we showed it the other way, with those relative bars on the percentage increase. You see the cumulative impact year over year on the rates for metropolitan there. And then mostly just to show the rate of increase jumped significantly once we get into this current period. And how much more of a degree of increase or the rate of increase that we're seeing in this period compared to even the inflationary increases on the local supply that all apply. So just much more than the typical rate of inflation of volatile costs. But that water, the local water does provide, for whatever we have available, significant savings. To put it a different way, and I was running these numbers, so for every 1,000 acre feet that we have less than local supply is about an extra $600,000 that we have to add into the rates. Here on the side. Next slide, please. And so getting into the Murrieta side of things, you see here similar sort of historical, except for the well side. We had the challenges, which is where all the investment, both in the wells and in wellhead treatment where applicable, came in. And so limited supplies the last few years, and then a significant increase, which is the good news, though, when we spent all that money into the 4 years in the rates. The trouble is, which we'll see in the next slide, that the cost of that water has gone up. So there's some cost pressure because it takes more to treat the water going into that. So roughly about half the water coming from local supply in this 4-year period. The other part, and we'll talk about this when we talk about water cells, but you notice sort of the bars increasing 1 year after the other. This has to do with there being more demands on the system, at least in our projection. There is a lot of development going on in Murrieta, and so that will add to the overall water demand. Next slide. So whereas Riverside was about half the cost, local supply was half the cost of imported water, we see even more value in Murrieta because it's all about all our infrastructure. We're not wheeling through another system. So it's roughly a fourth the cost of imported water, so even more value. But you'll notice, especially going from FY24, where costs for groundwater, let's say we're around $250 an acre foot, it's getting up to about $500 an acre foot by the end of the period. Visually, it doesn't look like much there, but proportionally, when it comes to the rates, that's the wellhead treatment, so that's the additional costs. So it does add some rate pressure, but you can see the value of groundwater here between the rate difference. Next slide. So this slide is just to highlight essentially one factor, which is one of the most important numbers that go in rate making is how much water are you going to sell? And so you ask any of us in a room what that number is going to be, and we'll all have different opinions and come up with that. And so, but we have to settle with something for projections. But water sales, if you haven't seen this in a visual way before, change dramatically depending on weather. And in the last 5 years, you can see this on just on the charts. We've seen both exceptionally wet weather and exceptionally dry weather all in the last few years. And so you've got almost almost 20,000 acre feet when we have an exceptionally dry year, and getting down to a little over 16,000 acre feet on a very wet year. And so what you see in the projections is us going in the middle, trying to be both moderate, not assuming a very dry year or a very wet year, but also including something for what we know for growth in accounts and these kinds of things during that period.
This is just in general water sales, or is it retail?
Our retail water sales for Riverside, all tiers.
But the same phenomenon is true in the wholesale market.
Yeah.
Is there a way to see, like, before the conservation efforts went? I mean, has that impacted our water sales at all?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, we can show that.
Yeah, I mean, I just,
We could run, so typically the way we show that is we go back to like 2010
sure.
or 2009 and show, we like to show that in per capita water reduction, but we could also show that in overall demands. The problem is it gets confusing with growth. So,
Right.
Maybe we're more efficient, but maybe we grew and it just kind of offset one another. But we can, let us let's think about presenting that at the next workshop.
Yeah, because that, the way I mean, I guess the way I'm thinking of it is like, we want people to conserve, but then do we want water sales to drop? Like, that's, that's how I see this slide. I'm like, are we
That's
promoting?
Greg's question.
I made this comment at Met, it's like, stop the conversation about conservation. Buy, sell, we gotta move water now for our reserves, and there's water to be sold. So, yeah, that's an interest, that's like a statewide debate now, is why would we drive conservation? Because all of our customers are, it's very frustrating for the customer, and we already heard that. We use less water, but we're getting charged more. And that's a big driver for why that's happening.
Fortunately for us, compared to Metropolitan, our rate structure recovers a lot more in our fixed costs on our monthly meter charges. So we have what's left over of our fixed costs, we've recouped tier one, which is the most stable water sales. So we're a lot less vulnerable than what we see in Metropolitan because of that.
Yeah, our rate structure is it leans very much towards recovering fixed costs with fixed revenue. Metropolitan is just the opposite. So we don't see that problem when sales go down. We don't have a huge hit on our reserves because we've adjusted our revenue system. Met hasn't.
And it's why that you're taking into account, when it comes to Met, you take account projects.
Correct.
Okay.
It's also, you'll hear customers ask, well, I pay for all these other charges, and that's exactly what they want their stable. And so no matter how much they're using, we still have to cover our system.
Right, because if we had a Met type rate structure, every time you saw a major variation there year to year on weather, we would be, rates go down 2%, they go up 15%, they go down, that's what we're trying to keep things stable. Next slide. You'll notice in the actuals here, so this is Murrieta. It looks almost identical, which is the point of how much weather influences things similarly. And to Tim's point, how much our wholesale customers, the other water districts we're selling water to, are going to have very similar stories with this. The only thing really that's different in this one, in the Riverside piece, you'll notice very small growth, at least proportionally, on the water sales year to year. There's a lot of development that's in the queue on the Murrieta side, so that it plays a larger impact, which is where you'll see going, essentially a jump of a few hundred acre feet worth of sales, which proportionally looks large, more for Murrieta. So only main difference there. And then next slide. So all of this to say, in order to continue to provide the service that we're talking about, you have to keep pace with rate increases. And so getting into cost management efforts, what have we done?
Yeah, so let's go to the next slide.
That's a quick question.
Yeah.
For clarification, I guess. So is the reason that on these charts that we have for Murrieta and Riverside goes to fiscal year 2024, then it jumps to 2026? Is that because 2025 we're in the year now and it was included in the previous 4 years? Okay. Be sure I see it.
It would have been estimates anyway, so it wasn't helpful for showing like it's real facts.
Right.
We only have a month.
Yeah.
A month and 5, yeah.
Right.
All right, let's go the cost management efforts. So we can't control inflation, obviously. We can't do a whole lot to control the cost of Met supply, although we're trying, we're up there trying to change things. When I go up and talk about the business model, we are trying to get Metropolitan more shifted to fixed revenues instead of variable. Director Gardner already hit on 0.035% increase in ad valorem revenue at the last budget cycle with Met. That's, a tiny bit. Director Denstead made a motion to double that. That got voted down. There's still talk about doing that, but we need to do that at Metropolitan. I think we need to do that at Metropolitan and a whole lot more. And so more is gonna happen. So we hope we can change that, but as it stands now, you know, we can't do a lot to influence the Met supply, obviously, inflation. What we can do is try really hard to knock down some of those costs. And it's not always a big proportion, but boy, it's on our staff's mind all the time. And it, you know, we kind of, you know, Kevin used to say, every dollar is important, right? And so we kind of have that philosophy, every dollar is important. So let me just kind of walk through a couple of the, cost containment measures. Let's go to the next slide. And one. There we go. So efficiency upgrades. So, you know, there's things that we can continually modify. And, you know, wastewater treatment is a bit of a science project every single day. And our operators are fabulous. I've told you this before. They went back and rethought how they could stop using so much natural gas to heat things and use more digester gas that we're generating. So that saved about $300,000, no, about $150,000, $180,000 a year. So that's pretty impressive. Then they also said, well, wait a minute, we can change our chemical dosing. And so that I was meeting with them over breakfast out there just to say good morning to everyone. And they said, oh, by the way, we've changed how we treat the water and we're saving about $1,000 a day. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a lot. And then, you know, your mind starts going, you're like, it's $360,000 a year that change. So all told, they're looking at knocking out $500,000 a year of operating costs in our wastewater treatment plants. So not astronomical for our budget, but every little bit helps.
And that's not Craig or Rick or myself telling them to do that. They do that on their own every single day. They're looking
Yeah.
for new efficiencies.
Yeah, that's Brian out there challenging our operators as they mature. Hey, go think more carefully about that. You know, you have good ideas, bring them back and let's check the science behind your idea and see if it's gonna work. And the science was right. And, you know, this is actually, it's not a huge dollar thing, but I'm really proud of the staff because this is where we throw out, this is how we did work before. Like, we should change if we can change. And if we have some smart operators that are like, I don't know why we do that anymore, let's elevate it and find out why. And our ops leadership team was like, we'll change, we don't care. Prove that it works, make sure the end quality of the wastewater is, you know, meets the water quality requirements that we have, and we changed. And it wasn't, you know, didn't take an act of Congress, we just stopped doing what we were doing and started changing. So that was a really good one. Next slide. The board hears about this all the time, securing grants, that's 5 years worth of grants, $70 million, not just grants, but earmarks also, we've combined them all. That was great, our grants team is really good. The federal administration was really good for grants. Let's not get too entrenched in $70 million every 5 years. It's probably gonna be a little tougher in the next 4 years because grant opportunities are gonna slow down. But our looking for them is not gonna slow down. Next slide. Pipeline replacement. So this is, we actually, we've done a lot in thinking about pipeline replacement. And, you know, I think of it like, well, we can't have pipes deteriorating and failing. But if you think about it more, it's like every outage from a leak impacts a customer and it impacts a business. You know, you turn someone off for 2 days, they go out of business. You know, if it's Costco, on business, they go for 2 days. Really important to the economy. We can't let that happen. But water loss is a big one. We don't want leaks. We don't want water loss. But I think for our reputation, no one wants to see a pipeline burst and have directors get phone calls that, hey, water's pouring down Wood. Someone do something. What's wrong with you guys? And so, you know, we want to be really proactive about these investments because even though you're spending $5 million a year, there's a lot of benefits to that. And remember, Rick said we're seeing CIP growth at 8%. So fixing it now is cheaper than fixing it later. And oh, by the way, a planned project to replace a worn out pipeline that's been breaking constantly, fixing it when it breaks is really expensive. Planning it ahead of time, bidding it out in a competitive environment saves our customers a lot of money. So really important. Oh, and then by the way, our finance team figured out a very private sector financial tool to use to get the board voted for $20 million to replace capital over 4 years. And so that's the money that we've been using. So we got that money cheap too. Next slide. Then interpointed reservoir management system. So you hear a lot about with the fires recently. It's like, why are your reservoirs not full all the time? Well, reservoirs can't be full all the time. It's impossible. But you don't want them empty. And so, where should they be? And how do you fill them? And this again is our operations team putting in a huge amount of effort. We also hired a team from UCR to actually model our system and figure out, given Edison rates, when are the optimum times to be refilling reservoirs? And when should you never hit the go button on a pump? And so that's all saved us a lot of money by being really smart the way we do it. Now, we still fight fires, and Paul and his team, when we hear about a fire, our guys hear about it before we hear about it. So a lot of times I get a call from our director that says, hey, there's a fire, are you prepping? And I call Paul, and Paul says, nope, already refilling all those reservoirs in that region, making sure that if something bad happens, we're full. So we get rid of the cost containment measures, and we make sure that we have firefighting water available if we need it. But that reservoir management system is really important. And this is where AI and technology and having smart systems is really saving us money.
And Craig, why wouldn't, as a consumer, why wouldn't you keep them full? What's the downside to keeping them?
Well, you have to circulate water in them for the water will get stale at the bottom. So you have to cycle the water through the tank, or we have water quality problems.
It's like a fountain.
Or a pool.
Or
A swimming pool has to be filtered.
And if you wanted to keep it full, if you said full all the time, that means we're pumping in prime cost periods.
Oh,
So every day, if the duck curve, if you're an electricity person, it gets really expensive from like 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock.
when everyone's using.
Everyone's getting home from work and turning on power. And so Edison does everything they can to, well, not everything, they incentivize you not to be using power then. And then when the sun goes down, all the solar stops. And so the duck curve is actually moving a little bit more now. Because when solar power all turns off when the sun goes down, they get a big hit on the energy supply side to generate electricity all of a sudden. So we have to play that game with rates, and they'll charge you more in those times, and we want to get out of those times.
The reservoir management system is a combination of things. Think of it as a big mixer. Mixes the water in the tank and allows our operations staff to add additional disinfection when it's needed, so they can keep the reservoirs a little higher. So it just keeps the water mixing. That's what it does.
and then when we have to turn it on to fill, is there a rate, like how many feet it fills and
Oh, yeah.
over time?
Oh, yeah. We're monitoring that on our SCADA systems all the time.
Okay.
Our operators, that's kind of job one
Yeah.
for our operations team.
I guess I'm thinking how fast can the response be?
It's
I
different.
mean, those are.
Yes,
Different for each reservoir.
absolutely different. And every little pressure zone has different volume capacity in reservoirs. So it gets really complicated really fast.
And it also depends on what the demand for water out of that reservoir is.
Yeah.
Because peak demand takes more water than the pumps and pipes can put in.
And some areas we have the luxury of surplus storage in those tanks, and some pressure zones it's tighter. So you might be moving water a lot more in a certain zone and another zone you don't. And I don't keep track of that. Paul could probably give a 5-hour presentation on that, about how they do it, but thank goodness they do it.
Yeah.
And we use models to help us.
Okay, I just know there's a lot of questions because of the fires about
Yeah.
reservoirs and what
For sure.
water levels. should be.
And so I don't want to get off on too far of a tangent, but every development, every business that goes in and connects, we go through a fire flow analysis. And the fire department tells us that new line for that new hotel has to have a certain flow for a certain duration of time to fight a fire at that hotel. So every new development goes through this process. So we check with the fire department says, for firefighting capacity, what do we have to have? Then it goes to our development services team and they look, and they're like, do we have enough reservoir space? Do we have enough, is our pipe big enough to move that much water to that fire hydrant sitting in front of the hotel? If yes, we're all good, no additional cost. If no, then the developer has to do something, upsize the pipe, add a second pipe. It could be they have to add more storage in our system. So they have to pay a piece of a future reservoir. So that all goes into every single development that we work with on development services. Marietta right now, it's really intense because they're changing how they grow. They're growing with higher density. And so pipelines that were planned for lower density are having to change to higher density, which means higher flows, bigger pipes. And so how do we do that? Our development services and Tim are meeting with the city and the fire department this week to talk through that again. We've been meeting with them a lot lately. But we got to make sure that their development side at the city understands the restrictions of fire flow and water delivery.
Thank you.
Next slide. Investing in groundwater banking, this is, obviously Victoria Recharge Basin was an important investment in trying to figure out how to get more water back into the ground so we can continue to produce out of the Arlington to Salter. And it's just a great process to put more water in the ground. But we're also talking about groundwater banking in other areas. So we're working with Valley District. We're building all kinds of recharge basins up there. We're looking at it at Metropolitan all throughout the state. So, very important. This, you hear press releases like the governor had with his executive order during the storm that happened last week. He issued an executive order to maximize groundwater capture. Well, that's kind of meaningless to say that for a storm. It takes us years and years and years to invest $10 million in facilities like this. And that's happening at every water district throughout the state that has groundwater management responsibilities. It's not an executive order, it's a long-term investment so that when these storms happen like last week and what's coming this week to Northern California, we can't just say, hey, someone turn on the faucet. It's like, no, make the investments so we can move water across the state. That's another brief commercial for SB 72.
Wilmots took like 10 years and like, I think 8 of it was the permitting process alone. Executive order is great, like knock off the 8 years with permit.
I would love to see an executive order where they say we've changed the process and we can get this through it. Look at Sites Reservoir. They're in the water rights permitting process in front of the state board. If the state board doesn't like it, they could say, no, you don't get any water rights. Sites Reservoir, you're dead. Dead in the water. So that's where the executive leadership needs to come statewide, is we get those things permitted. And that's not even talking about the $5 billion investment to build it. So, So anyway, very, very important to us. That's planning for the future right there. All right, next one. All right, get a cup of coffee. Let's take a real quick break and then we'll. Hey, Charlotte.
and I'm like, I'm dying right now. It's like, oh, my shit. What else could I do? Yes, I do that. Thank you.
Change this.
The county of Brooklyn.
Yes.
This is how we get. Little bit.
I'm getting it here.
You know, family circus will be about these. I don't even want to think of the game. Yeah.
Pictures. I can't, I don't work with pictures. I need descriptions.
So, just like, for me, so me personally. I don't know what this.
Uh-oh. So
I'm not sure what this.
yeah, that. So, yeah, so we trimmed all that out because it was all so small, you cut very good. So we just bubbled it into one. Yeah, these are posts. These are, this is, the treatment. And I think it's.
Well, it's fine.
Yeah, yes,
Should be,
but
yes.
also the language, you know, say, amend this project and the CISP budget. for it.
Yeah, we have.
It's about-
Yeah.
It's got bold.
All right, President Rogan, you ready to roll again?
Should be.
Yes. Call the meeting back to order at 10:55.
Excellent. Next slide, please. All right. Back to, let's get back to what I already gave you the executive summary on. So Rick's gonna talk, how we landed on the bill impacts. Next slide.
And so this is, as you come back from break, just a reminder on what the specific proposal is, essentially 7% in that range for Riverside, a little bit less than that in Marietta compared to what we had thought. Essentially at 8% during the budget time. And then really in that $8, $9, $10 range, you know, as actual bill impacts per month for our typical customers. Any other questions on this before we move on, since it's a recap? So the next slide, and I thought this one was important. The story can get really complicated. And so this one draws home the main point, and I think it's important for our customers to know and for us to be able to share it. But all getting to this, you know, you have different tiers. Tiers 1 is for indoor water use, and 2 is for outdoor, and then 3 and 4 we get into inefficient water use. But tier 2 is probably the easiest black and white example of this. And so that's the one that we chose to put up here on the screen, because it's also the tier that most of the billing comes in at. It's the widest range. So all that being said, we have our costs, Met has their costs. But largely our costs we offset with our customers' property tax dollars. And so we take those dollars in, and then we directly offset our costs on that. So they only pay a remaining sliver when it comes to their actual water bill. And so this shows up here on the example of when a customer's paying their tier 2 rate. Essentially for every dollar, 92 of it goes immediately to our bank account and back out to Metropolitan. So they're essentially paying what we pay Met is. And so you get sort of the sense, and this is why we started with the presentation sometime. You know, we're not profiting off of this. We're not holding on to it. Everything that we take in, whether in this year or future year, goes back to the benefit of the customer. But most specifically, when they're paying their bills, this vast majority of it goes right back out to pay who we're paying to get service. And only 8 cents is really relating to our costs here in our system. With the rest of that not on their bill being the property taxes that we're applying to our own costs to maintain and operate the system. So
On top, and then so on top of that, from those 8 cents, there was like one slide, this one. Those 8 cents goes to these things.
right, so of that middle sort of section on the slide that you're looking at, around 50% of system O&M. So that's being paid for from, I guess, 3 sources. One is their meter charge, right? The other is what they pay here, that 8 cents. And lastly, which isn't shown in any of these, which is the property taxes that when we come in, we're using to pay for that.
So property taxes offset the retail rates.
Yes,
Yeah.
significantly.
Is there a percent or it varies?
It's roughly for tiers 1 and 2, and Dave can give me the exact number, but think of it like $1 a unit in that ballpark. So if they're paying 2 now, it would really be 3, but we offset it. So to show you how significant that is.
With property tax, I thought that was just in Marietta Corona.
No, that's just in Riverside. We don't have property tax specific to Marietta, so they stand on their own. It's a very small amount, but it's not really.
Yeah, so out of the $3.84 that is our charge, 99 cents in the first year and offset property tax.
So, and that's property taxes collected in the retail area. not property taxes collected outside of the retail.
Okay.
Next one.
So much like Director Gardner was highlighting that Metropolitan increased by 0.035%, their property tax portion of their revenue. Ours is much more significant. That's a fixed revenue that is super beneficial to keeping our costs down.
What would it take for us to increase it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It'd go to vote.
So we'd increase it.
No, vote of the people.
It'd go to the popular vote. If we want to increase the property tax percentage, the rate of property tax would be a vote of the people.
And that's a 2/3 vote.
Sure.
Generally speaking, it's not a majority.
Our property tax, the actual amount has been climbing because of assessed values.
What if we?
Ad valorem is a general tax, so it's 50%,
Oh, okay, it's not
not 2/3.
2/3 vote, it'd be a 50. Either way,
What if we wanted to increase the offset? Is that something the board can do, or that would
increase
have to
the,
be voted on?
the,
Increase the dollar offset
oh,
to their rates?
no, that's what we decide on how it's utilized internally. So the board could direct us to do something different. There's a lot that goes into that. We would
Yeah.
have a lot of meetings to talk
Yes.
about why we want to do that.
It's not simple.
But that's our own decision of how it's applied.
That would mean that there'd be less money for capital projects as well.
Yeah, but to give the sense, the vast majority of that property tax coming in from the retail rate is going to direct Allison. So we're not talking about much left over, if any.
But I think philosophically, we feel strongly that it's the customer's money and they're investing in water, and so we should invest it in water on their behalf. And so if it's, whether it's projects for their water future or offsetting their rates now, it's money coming from those customers. So I think it's kind of nice that we have this opportunity to invest some of their property tax money for their future, which they probably might not choose if you ask them for a vote on how it should be proportioned. So I think it's actually good that we have some flexibility there.
But it sounds like the bulk of it is going to offset rates already, so. Okay.
The other piece which sometimes gets lost when we're talking about this is, just to clarify, so when we talk about property taxes, whether retail or the wholesale, our whole service area outside of the retail, none of those are separate property taxes that we're charging our customers. That's just the share of their normal property tax that happens to get kicked back to Western.
Yes.
So there's not like a separate line item that we're charging our
Right.
Springs market, which is important, because it's really just what share of 1% we get back from the county when we're talking about this. So
So it would be the county that puts a measure like that.
Yes.
Yes, the district could propose it, but it ultimately goes to the voters.
So if we wanted the county to give us more in ad valorem,
You would need to increase that 1% ad valorem tax, and then we'd get more because we get a certain share of that 1%.
Yeah, I think her question was, Western couldn't go to the
register. of
to the voters and say, Western wants to increase property taxes. Who would initiate that?
The district could within the district's area, but it would have to be voted on by the voters still.
This is interesting.
Yeah, and
There's a
just,
cost to that vote.
I'm
We
sorry,
would
There is a
pay for the
cost to
vote.
that.
it would be tremendous cost, yes.
Million.
and just to be clear on that, and this is an area I've looked at before, with Luke from BVK. So you can't get more of the 1%, so you can't argue to the county to say, we deserve a bigger slice of the pie, you'd be tacking on top of that. And then, it's getting a little bit in the weeds, but I'll try and keep it straightforward. To just keep it at an ad valorem, which is, the share of the property's value, it has to be project-based, we have to be issuing debt that our owners are repaying, so you can't just get a general share more. Otherwise, it's like a per parcel charge, kind of like how CFDs work. So it gets really complicated really quick. And so mostly, that's why I mentioned the 2/3, any practical way that we would really be looking at like an ongoing share or an ongoing amount more property taxes, it's a 2/3. So just that comes into play, which is almost, not impossible, but almost impossible to get that kind of support. And usually it's a very specific project, like the, great project that really makes sense to customers and why we're doing this for them, to get that level of support from broad populace. But it's a difficult threshold, just to say that. So this slide is just bringing it back home. Essentially, we talked cost pressures and all the mechanics behind that, getting back to what we're really providing. And ultimately, we talk about water for every moment, getting customers clean water exactly when they need it. That's not just today, it's for the future. And so, we mentioned 1.2 billion in infrastructure. There's a lot that goes into planning for the future, and investing for that future so that what we're providing today continues on for the generations to come. So next slide, getting into the process. As you know, we go through this process every 4 years, but it's not a rate increase every 4 years. It's a rate increase every year. We just update what we think we need every 4 years based on the latest and greatest, and that's what the study does. So the numbers that you're seeing are based on the most updated information that we have. They're based on the budget, which is board approved, as Craig mentioned, but also any updates, projections, and development, all these things to make sure that it's the best number that we can get you. And then the last point on here, which we've kind of already made, but just to give a sense, there's a lot that went into what looks like very similar numbers year to year, the smoothing over the 4 years. It did not naturally come in a smooth form. But what that takes is a lot of resources, whether that's property taxes being applied to this, or in the case of Murrieta, reserves, so that our customers don't see massive rate spikes in the first year because we're doing that for their benefit. Now, we manage it so that it's moderate and we're still at healthy reserve levels by the end. But there's a lot that goes into giving you numbers that are 7% across the board and 6% across the board at the bottom.
For the next 4 years, but last year it was 2%. So there is a spike.
There is. It would have been much higher though, is my point without managing it. Yes. Next slide. So to get to this point, is what we are facing is not a Western specific challenge, right? So any similarly situated entity in our region that is dealing with the Met challenge of rising costs as well as inflation challenges, infrastructure, everything we all share in one degree or another. And you see that played out with what sort of our sister agencies are dealing with. And so the range either that they've most recently adopted or are looking at all recent is in the exact range or higher than what we were proposing. And that's what you shared here. And so 7 to 10%, above 10% in certain years for those that aren't smoothing, in that 6% range you see for Eastern, they do 2-year rate, and then Corona 9 to 16%. So just to say, this is all something that we're facing common set of challenges.
I think it might be helpful to put Riverside RPU on that, because our Riverside customers are gonna compare most to what is RPU increase. And I think it could be helpful if we put our percentages on that slide as well, so that they don't have to go back and look.
Mhm.
And RPU is a perfect example of it being pushed decades
Yeah.
down the line.
Yes. And the RPU staff would argue that even the prior rate adjustment program was not a true cost of service rate program. It was kind of pushed by the city council to push off projects and some other things to hold rates down.
Next slide. So wrapping up when we're talking about process, a couple of key things. Next slide. The first being what you'll see and that we're working on, a big piece of this is the 218 notice. And so that's a legal requirement we've dealt with in years past for a long time. So that's familiar. But you really have the element here being, full disclosure to our customers. So this notice tells them everything that they need to know how this impacts them. And gives them the opportunity to protest, right, to engage with us on that. And so that's being worked on, and that's above and beyond. I would say that's the baseline, and above and beyond that, what Grace will talk about in a bit. We just also discussed, which are all of the community meetings and other outreach. But every customer gets this, and every customer or property owner has a chance to respond back if they don't agree.
Everyone's getting this pamphlet? is what you're
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Rev mentioned, the board will see sample copies the day that the setting of the public hearing is before you. So we'll get to see those samples. We can't issue them before that because you have to direct us to actually post the public hearing and provide that information. But we'll be ready to go so that should the board move to do so, those notices will go out. They'll meet all the requirements and in fact hit some above and beyond outreach standards.
So this is the notice for the public hearing, but this brochure that's pictured up
Correct.
there?
It will include more detailed rate information specific to the customers that will receive it. So for example, I'm in Riverside and I also receive sewer, my notice will have both of them included.
And then, so besides this, is there any other one pager?
Yeah, and Grace will will help provide a summary of what a lot of this will come.
And so that, as Sarah mentioned, you'll see when we ask you to set the final public hearing in June, but we have that meeting to make that decision in April, you'll see that then. Next slide.
Before you go, Rick.
Oh, sure.
On the first bullet, rates can only recover the cost of providing service no more. They could be less. I mean, it's rates.
Yes.
Revenue from rates are set by grants, by property taxes, by not doing things that you otherwise want to do. So I.
Yeah, less,
I'm
we'll
troubled by
strike,
the numbers.
we'll strike less.
That's a great catch.
Because Metropolitan could not raise rates for some reason, the Met board could say no. And then we would lower our rates to match that, yeah, we'll get rid of less, I think.
Okay.
you're right.
Thanks.
Yeah, actually, we often.
It actually says, this is the maximum amount that you can raise them.
Right.
I think where that was going is more so the 218 process, that one customer sector cannot subsidize another customer sector.
Right.
So agreed, it's not good that way.
Thanks.
And then the next slide. So this one is the new process, and we've touched on this a little bit at previous meetings, but so there is a new option available to the district to take advantage of some additional legal protections, but at its core, just as with the 218 was about full disclosure to our customers and chance for them to engage with the district if they disagreed with the rate increases. Here, it's an even more specific process that if they have a specific complaint about how we calculated the rates, not just that they don't like the rates in general, that they can engage with the district in that process. And then we would be responding to each of those in writing specifically to address their concerns. And if we do that, then that allows us some additional protections. Essentially, it's all about the customers engaging with us now while we're making decisions, not years later protesting at them. And you'll hear more on the details of the process of the next workshop. We figured that might be a little too much for today. And then Grace, if you wanted to cover the outreach process.
Sure, next slide. So we've taken you through 44-ish slides. We have a second workshop plan and potentially a third workshop plan. So our challenge in communications is how do we take all of this complex information and break it down into a digestible way for our customers to understand. And so we want to make sure that we build understanding, they feel informed about the process, and they can give us feedback as well. So we've been doing that in a number of ways. We kick this off in a more straightforward way recently with our latest newsletter, Western Water 411, and on social media by highlighting these workshops. But we don't want to get ahead of the board. So we're kind of building a foundation and then building up from there. These are kind of some of our key milestones, but really what I want to highlight is that they will start to see a lot more information coming soon. So things like postcards, they'll get messaging on the outside of their bill, so they don't even have to open their water bill. It'll be there for them. Inserts in their bill, on the bill message. We're only talking rates and open house for the most part. And so again, we're building on this process as we move forward. So you'll see a lot of that coming out.
And Director Chris, to your question specifically, what other ways will they receive information outside of that Prop 218? So as you heard through past committees, one of the number one ways our customers told us they want to hear from us about this is through digital communication. So that's those Water 411 newsletters. So they're getting all of that information regularly in addition to what's being printed on their bills, on their envelopes, inviting them to sessions through both like print and digital means. So there'll be a lot of information available. And then of course, we have our website updated, maintained as our house for all of this information. So that when anyone has a question, they can go to a one-stop location to get all of that.
These workshops, we've recorded them, so we'll also post that information so they can watch later if they'd like to as well. And then we planned 3 customer information sessions. One will be here in person at the district in April. The other one will be in Marietta at a location we're determining, also in April, and then we'll do a virtual session. So they have 3 opportunities to attend when we present the same information.
Separate from the workshops.
Separate, yeah. Next slide. And so coming up on our next workshop on March 13th will be from 6 to 8 p.m. We'll follow up on any board member requests that we get out of this meeting, propose our sewer rates, our non-residential customer bill impacts. We'll look at water budget, structural changes, and then other rate information that Daisy or Rick would like to share. That's coming up on March 13th. That's our second board workshop.
And non-residential customer bill, that's commercial and industrial. Okay.
Next slide. And then again, just highlighting some of those important dates. The second board workshop is March 13th. We have a tentative one scheduled for March 26th. Our customer and stakeholder education will continue on, like I mentioned, and then including those customer information sessions. Board meeting to set the public hearing is April 16th. We'll send out the Prop 218 notice right after that meeting, and then our public hearing is June.
As we mentioned tentative for the 3rd workshop. My intention is to hopefully cover everything in workshop number 2. If there's more questions or we're not quite there yet, we'll have workshop number 3, but we don't have an agenda for workshop number 3. We think we're getting through everything the next workshop. Board wants more, want to hear more, happy to utilize the 26th.
Next slide.
All right, well, your leadership matters. Obviously, you know, this is a responsibility, and you know, the board, you're the one that has to answer to the public, and so we want to prepare you for that. We think we're bringing a really logical, fair budget rate proposal to you. We've had great interaction today. Really appreciate your questions and your comments. You know, we try and predict what's going to land with you, and so it's really good to hear the input. And we'll adjust accordingly for the next presentation. But you know, we fully recognize that you're the decision makers, and we want to make you very good at making that decision, prepare you accordingly. So your leadership does matter. Next slide. And we're happy to answer more questions, or if there's things that you'd like to see us highlight, let us know now. This is director comments. What do you have?
Anybody? The community group meetings, are you guys reaching out? Are we attending? Can we attend those as well? to be able to be present to answer if they.
Yeah, so this community meetings, they're the regular community meetings that are monthly. Our groups attend regularly. They have a designated representative. They're used to seeing. And as board members, you're welcome to show up anytime. They're public. We can, if requested, start sharing when we have more specific presentations planned. We've started that this spring with the foreshadowing. Hey, we want to remind you who we are, why we matter to your specific group, share some of our challenges, and let the community know we are going to be looking at a rate change this year. Here's when you can expect more information, and then we'll follow up and return with more detailed presentations in that May timeframe. We want to be sensitive, not getting out ahead of setting the public hearing, but we can do that and certainly encourage you to attend. I know Dr. Torres has attended regularly in the past, so that'll be ongoing.
I just want to, are you done? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to follow up with that. I would like a list for my, I'm not
Yeah.
going to bring it. I would like a list for myself, to try and attend. But I do want to say just a huge thank you that, one, yeah, you guys have been so great, especially in my area, but two, to have Craig present at those. I think it matters. I think, that, you know, Craig being there as our general manager is important, and I really appreciate that. What I would like to know is if, I don't know how quickly this can happen or if it's planned, but I would like to have something that I can hand out when either I'm at community group meetings or something separate. For instance, you know,
Like a one pager.
a one pager. That's why I kept asking
Yeah.
about that trifold, because I was like, is this only available at that time?
Yeah.
I would love something to hand out myself with these timelines. Obviously the information presented to us, or that would be presented. I would like to have that well before May. If that's available, if that's possible. Just, I see people, you know, and I think Director Dan says the same. We see people all the time and they ask us all the time. And then, I know you do this for us all the time, but is there maybe like social media assets that we can share? I love sharing my own stuff, but I would like to be congruent with you all. I think you're doing a phenomenal job in the messaging portion, and so however I can be helpful in that way. But those are.
For the session, this is a great opportunity to remind of your board toolkit. We are keeping that space active, updated regularly, especially with great information. And we can make sure our social post schedule and assets are there for you as well. But if there's a method that's easier for you, or when you prefer maybe a draft email or something, let us know. We want to make it accessible so you can easily use it. And we're going to be posting a ton in those spaces. So even just like a share, and then let us take the questions for you. Then you share directly from our site. We then get the notifications when comments are coming through, and we can better support those responses.
I'm happy to do that. I just want to, yeah, like I said, be congruent. with
Definitely.
what you guys are doing. Those are my questions. I look forward to the next workshop. But like I said before, I think you're doing a great job in the outreach, which is, everyone knows that's what matters.
Oh. We promised Director Risby the extra slide.
Birthday? No, the slide.
There you go. You asked, how do you figure out the average customer?
Customer, yeah.
I don't, Daisy, you wanna walk through that?
Yeah, so our average Riverside residential customer, or what we call the median residential customer for that service area, is 4 people in the home. And then 4,900 square feet of irrigated area, and they use about almost 22 units of water per month. And that's the customer that's the typical, quote unquote, typical residential customer in the Riverside service area.
Currently paying $120 a month. That's the
And
number.
then
Yeah, that's
almost 128 or 129.
So it's nice, that's an average retail customer, I guess in Riverside. But the non-average are equestrian, that's who I hear from the most, is the
Large lots,
Right.
large landscaped area.
Yes.
Maybe it'd be good to show her at least see those numbers, only because, yeah, they're the ones that I get
Are
the emails from the most.
We usually go 75th percentile, get to a 75th percentile, and that takes care of a lot of Gavin Hills area.
Okay.
Mhm.
I have
This
to
is,
hear.
this is just water, not sewer.
Yes.
Yes.
Bring that to the next one.
That will be great.
Cause I get, I get I have 4 horses and I can't afford, those are the questions I get. And it's probably like 5 of them for all I know, but one of them is loud. And, okay,
Mhm.
that's interesting.
And you can also see on here the fixed and the variable charges.
That's,
So, look, the tier 1, tier 2, that's water usage, but everything below that are fixed charges. Yeah, and that's why people, they don't get, if I really cut back, I still have to pay all those fixed charges. Yeah. Yeah, that's the entire system being prepared, so when you turn that faucet on, it's ready.
And it has to be delivered to them.
so it's the.
Lifted.
That's why I said that one slide was like the most important slide.
Yeah, but it's the Netflix charges, right? They're there.
Yeah.
You have to spend them.
Yeah.
I got it. Now I can.
I mean, I binge watch nightly, but I rarely get to watch one show because it's so busy here, so it'll be the same.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that
I'm
was,
like,
that's,
that analogy work, and all it did is piss me off at Netflix again. Like, yeah.
Oh, we should have been Netflix, not.
No, like, no, it's working.
I'm like, I like this, we'll give you more budget if you have more people in your house.
And we're
You know? So. That's maybe like, look at you, 4 people.
Right.
Or lifestyle.
Yeah.
Well,
So I wanna seek a little clarification. Tammy and I are having a little conversation. Chatting here. Community meetings are not published board meetings.
Right.
Okay.
So no decisions are being made. We want you to listen in and not necessarily comment, because then it becomes a board forum issue if you have more people there.
Okay.
So
But if there are more than 3 of us, doesn't it have to be public?
There's actually an exception for Brown for these meetings. If they're open to the public and they're somewhat notified, there's an exception under the Brown Act that says it doesn't become a meeting of this legislative body, so.
As long as we're just in the group.
listen only.
Right, word, yes.
There's no decision-making going on, there's no votes. It's informational.
I guess it can sit in the group.
It's important to be an active listener
Okay.
and not necessarily engaging in
Right.
Pause, we will be down this one.
Don't sit with me.
Can we go back to the closing slide?
This is really good. It makes sense.
Good.
Thank you.
I like the picture of Darren.
Oh, yeah, mine.
We do, and when you have questions,
Great.
Derek.
Should we say thank you?
Thank Darian.
Very informative. If there is no other discussion or
Really
question,
good presentation.
Well, it's a huge team effort. This is one of those things that really does take a village to pull together. And, I want to thank our staff. They're the technical experts. And they have worked really hard to vet this and bounce things off of me and the other executive staff. And there's just been a lot of thought. And, at budget time, I kind of opened up at the budget time and said, I'm not playing games and in a negotiation mode with the board. We trimmed that budget and we cut everything out that we could cut out of that. And I think it's kind of the same thing with the rates. We already looked at every way we can to lower the rates. And so, we're not negotiating and, Metropolitan, I always feel like it's a bit of a game. It's a negotiation. They throw something up there, then they go back and they're asked to recalculate and they come back and they do that 2 or 3 times. And, I hope that we've conveyed to you that, there's been a lot of thought that's been put into this to come back with a very fair proposal for our customers. But that's why we have these workshops, because this is your opportunity to say, I don't agree, or I'd like to see something changed, or can we tell the story differently? And that's why we're taking all this time. So I appreciate your patience. That's a lot of slides in a long time. Daisy did a great job pulling this all together. And Grace too.
well, and I like the idea that it did come in under estimate.
Yes.
That's always helpful.
It is good.
Okay, if there's
Yeah,
nothing
just
else.
One thing that I'm sure you have the answer in your head, but when we start talking in public, often we're gonna get comments about, well, why don't you just lower your reserves a bit and defer some rate increases?
We'll have to figure out how to put that
Yeah.
in a slide. The
It's-
value of reserves is very difficult for the public to get.
It is.
And we'll likely use Marietta as an example. Marietta was exactly what a customer would want out of reserves. Because when we took the North Well down, I don't remember the number. The rate increase that we should have implemented on customers, because we shifted to 100% net water.
17%.
Yeah, it should have been a 17% rate increase immediately to all of our customers, and we literally took all that out of reserves for a couple of years while we built the North Well. And those reserves that the customers had invested in bridged that gap.
At one point, it was $110,000 a month
Yeah.
in additional costs for the water while the well was down.
And now we'll have to replenish those reserves again. So within those rates is reserve replenishment kind of buried in there. You know, it's not a line item, but it's in there. Good point. We'll remember that.
It will come.
It will come as well as salaries.
Yeah.
It always comes up.
It does.
That always comes up.
And the other piece is we are adding some people, but not very many. And we've seen slides on that before, but you should probably have that at your fingertips too.
We'll prepare our justification.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think because of our communication has improved so much with our community over the last 5 years. I used to get questions like, why don't you just close and let RPU run you? We don't even need you anymore. And the tenor has really changed at community
Yeah.
meetings. We'll see this Wednesday night. But even, you know, when we were at Woodcrest Mac last time, it was really good. You know, we didn't hear that. The discussion was really about water supply, which is where we want it to be there. All right, well, thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you. That was great. I think we're adjourned at 11:32.